Hello, everyone. It's been a hot minute since we've all come together. I am going to be joined by a really good friend of mine, Sarah Bauer. We've been working on like underwater munitions and all kinds of crazy things that nobody talks about, and that's why we're going to talk about them. Anyway, without any further ado, she's here in the studio, so to speak. It's all virtual. Nobody actually goes anywhere anymore. But here it is. Sarah, what is going on? How are you?
Hi, it's so good to see you again. Um, but everything's going well here. I know I'm 2 hours behind you since I'm in Hawaii right now. But with all this virtual stuff, we can all be together, so that's really great.
I know. I wish I was in Hawaii right now. Like that is the plan. I know that I'm going to get there at some point, but we'll see what happens. It's been kind of like gnarly trying to figure out this whole situation. Speaking of situations, we didn't come here to talk about COVID, did we? We came here to talk
No, we
about
didn't. We
underwater
didn't.
munitions, like what's like our favorite topic. So for those of you who don't know and maybe don't listen to me, or maybe have just blocked me at this point, like underwater munitions is one of these things that I've been talking about in I don't know the last few months or so. And Sarah and I got in contact because well, I made some pretty loudmouth comments on Instagram, and then we got to talking over Instagram. And she's in Hawaii, and there were these two munitions. They're still there, right, Sarah?
Yeah, so they're still in the water. They're these two unexploded ordinances. They'd been there, already for 60 years and whatnot. Um, and a lot of people already knew about them. But it got reported and then it became, a direct threat. So, government was forced to take action. And they were going to explode these ordinances, and thank God they didn't, because that would have been really detrimental to the environment. But honestly, I'm so glad it kind of broke the headlines and got out, because then I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have known what a massive problem we have in our oceans right now, because these dumped underwater munitions at sea, they're not talked about, they're not brought up. I'm at University of Hawaii at Manoa. It's not something I was ever taught in university or high school, but it's a really big problem.
Yeah, and I guess I mean originally I was thinking, well, what happens if they blow it up? Like I mean, obviously we think about okay, well, it's going to destroy the coral reef, but what are the options? I know that was something that was kind of interesting to me in the very beginning. I mean, if somebody does see one of these things, what are the options? What can we do?
Yeah, exactly, right. So if you have a munition in the water, the primary existential threat we're seeing is what happens if they explode and someone's right there? What happens if someone touches it, moves it, they explode? And that's definitely a threat and something we have to consider. But we also need to think about the threat they're posing to the environment, not just leaving them there in place. Because when we leave them there in place, they become and they are, these point source emitters of really toxic chemicals and heavy metals, that have really toxic effects on any, biota, marine life, and human life. But then, right, you don't want to just go in and explode it either, because then the way we explode them is we add more TNT.
Right.
We already have all this bad stuff in the water, and we decide we're going to put more in to
I
explode it.
mean, why not?
Uh,
I mean, it's gonna look cool.
yeah, it'll look cool. Um, no, so I mean that's what we've done in the past, and what was one of the main ways we've dealt with it. We've said, "Oh, look at these munitions," which, by the way, we put there in the first place. Now they're posing a new threat. So how do we address this? Do we leave it there? Do we explode it? And what they've been doing in the past is exploding it. But what we haven't been exploring is this third option, and that's the option that we want to, push today. Right? We want to not explode them, not leave them in the environment, because both of those ways, they're hurting things. They're
Mm.
hurting marine life and they're hurting human life, and we can go more into that in a bit. But what we can do is we can take these out of the water, right? We don't need to leave these in the water. We don't need to explode them and release everything into the environment. We can
Exactly.
take them out. We can take them out of the water, and we can neutralize them, you know, we need to look at this third option, and we know we just need to kind of bring this stuff to the light, because that's what it's been out of sight, out of mind. We've
Well, I
thrown them
mean,
into the
don't get me
this
wrong.
dark.
Like I think I feel like I'm like a perpetual 12-year-old. Like if there's a chance to blow something up, I will always want to blow something up. But obviously, it's not good for the environment. But you touch on something that I think is really important. I mean, you talk about kind of like the health impacts, and I guess that process of like having these chemicals leak in, and all these different types of life eat it, and kind of that process that you're talking about is bioaccumulation. But I mean, can you talk a little bit about maybe? And by the way, for any of you guys that are watching, you're more than welcome. We're here just kind of riffing, hanging out. If you have any questions about this stuff, Sarah is like become an expert. Like she's done more research than like most people that I know about this particular topic in recent times. So feel free to shoot a question. We'll answer it. And Becca, thank you for watching. I'm so glad that you're here. Yeah, what are the health impacts? Like, because like I think everyone in Hawaii was thinking, no, don't blow it up because we love our coral reefs. Like, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I think what people are often already familiar with when we talk about seafood is mercury, because we can also see that, naturally, and people always hear maybe you don't want to eat too high on the food chain when it comes to seafood a lot, because you're going to build up this mercury in your system.
Right.
And that's exactly what bioaccumulation is. It's right. It's this buildup of these things in organisms. But what we see getting released is these chemicals. And so we have things like mustard gas, we have sarin, we have cyanogen chloride. They're these really toxic chemicals. And even when they're in the water, they can degrade into kind of kid compounds, maybe if you parent compounds and whatnot. And those can be just as toxic. So what we have happening is marine organisms eating them, and you can have sublethal effects, and maybe they just can't reproduce or whatnot, or maybe they can't sense prey or predators around them. But so we see this buildup in the environment, and we also see the human health effects when people are eating these things, right? Because they're built up in the animals, and then we eat them, and they end up in us. And
Wow,
one of
it's crazy.
yeah, exactly. And biggest example of this, if you look into Vieques, Puerto Rico, right? Here we see people who are having substantially increased levels of liver cirrhosis, hypertension, cancer, and these terrible health consequences. So it's not just about the environment and
Yeah.
animals, but it's about people. It's about all of these island nations and people who survive on fish.
Jacques Cousteau said years ago that we were treating the ocean like our garbage can, and we're still doing it. And it's like, the question is like, I think it's interesting because I feel like in some ways humans rarely do the right thing until presented with some kind of mortality, and I think that's really at the point in which we're getting right now. That's crazy. We have a comment here. Let's see here. Angela. Angela, welcome to the broadcast. So glad that you're here. What is going to cause cancer? Yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about that, Sarah. I know you were talking a little bit about the process, but why is this? So we were talking about conventional weapons, which is TNT, which by the way has a half-life of 5,000 years. But why does that cause cancer? Do we know that?
So right, you can get cancer from a myriad of ways, right? Lung cancer from smoking, right? It's you're polluting your body, right? Maybe it's like oxidization. Even oxygen can have really damaging, corrosive effects. So when this you're getting harmful things into your body, you're allowing it to do damage. You're allowing it to mutate cells and injure your cells. So that's what's happening when you're eating chemicals, and you're eating, and it's not just even the what's inside these shells, but the shells themselves that are containing these really toxic things. They have these metals, right, and they end up getting corroded away by the salt and by ocean waves, and the materials they're holding inside them, and those also end up in the oceans and our marine environment.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, we look at like some of this stuff. I mean, it's been in the ocean for a while, so I mean, it's just kind of like leaching out, and I think that's kind of thing. I think our mutual friend Terrence Long, who he's by far the expert on all of this stuff. I've learned a lot from him in his past. I don't know how long has it been that we've been talking about this stuff. Anyway, I've kind of lost track.
Oh, me too. Plus, I don't know. This year, I feel like
Dude, I've
time
been stuck in
time
this
time
room.
isn't moving the
No,
same way.
no, I've been stuck in this room for like I think 8 months. I'm starting to. It's so funny. I made a comment on Facebook like when this whole thing started, where everybody was in lockdown, and I put on my Facebook like a picture from Lost, and like I forget the guy's name that was in like the bunker, and he'd been there since like the 80s, and I was like, hey, I'm just down here in my bunker. I shouldn't have done that because now it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like I'm here, I'm in the bunker, and I'm like, I feel like the
You
next thing for me is
manifested
I'm
it.
just going to be typing in those numbers, right, and just so that I can stay alive. Um, yeah, I think what's really interesting is like before all of this, like all of us knew about plastics. I mean, I think that's been something that's on everybody's mind when it comes to the ocean, and even bioaccumulation actually happens in plastic as well. I remember in 2015. I was really grateful to be going to COP21, which was, as everybody now refers to it, as the Paris Agreement. And in Paris, that's where I learned that phrases like every second breath that we breathe come from the ocean. The other thing that was really powerful was that every single piece of plastic that's ever been made still exists in some form on the planet, and it doesn't go away; it just breaks down. And what we find in the ocean, especially just east of Hawaii, is you have nanoplastic and microplastic. It's actually a plastic smog, and that stuff gets into our food. And I don't know, I forget what the
And
phrase is, but I think it was like, or the study was like, I think we all eat like, was it a credit card full of
credit card
plastic?
a week or
Yeah,
something. Or, yeah, I forget the exact, but
so
it's
gross.
crazy.
Yeah,
But then it's right. It gets broken up so small. Even the plankton are eating it.
right.
That is tiny,
Yeah,
right? I look at plankton under a microscope,
right.
and you're thinking the plastic is getting so small that the things that I look at under a microscope are eating this.
It's insane. It's insane, So,
Yeah.
for those of us, you just mentioned that you are look at this stuff under out of a microscope. What do you do normally? Like, why do you have a microscope? Why are you looking at this? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm still in university, but I specialize more in environmental and marine science. So just in labs, and I've done some work with plastics because we'll try to uh, we'll do these kind of plankton pulls, and you can look at plankton and plastics that you catch in the water. Because it is a massive problem. We need it. We're trying to see, how much has actually gotten into our environment, because that's how we get all these statistics of, we're going to have more plastic in our oceans than fish by weight in 2050 and whatnot. Um, uh, right now, I have a friend. He's doing really brilliant work looking at marine debris. And that, right, we get talking about plastics and marine debris, then we have another issue we're talking about. And we have these ghost fleets and fishing nets, right? Because we
Horrible
have
stuff.
so much illegal fishing and all of these nets just getting cast out. Um, so I gotta say, I think we're pretty similar. We definitely kind of love the oceans and get caught up in a lot of the issues. I know, like you said, we haven't been talking about munitions for that long,
Yeah,
but I know our conversations have gotten interrupted a lot and distracted because we keep having all of these other disasters.
sure.
Kamchatka Peninsula,
I know.
right?
I know.
Massive die-off of animals, and it's just what's going on here.
Yeah.
Then a week later, then you're getting distracted by an oil tanker that might spill massive amounts of oil into
Which
the
is still
ocean.
leaking, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And right, we're still, I mean, these massive die-offs and whatnot, they've been happening forever. I just was reading recently more, because I was looking at Nova Scotia because of Terrence Long, the wonderful. I was looking more around Nova Scotia because he was talking about some munitions there. But then I was even reading about, all these massive die-offs in 2016. So it's happening everywhere. And I think the most recent disaster we were just looking at was in the LA Times, all these DDT dumpings off of Catalina Island. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Captain Paul Watson once said that the most dangerous thing that you can have is a camera, because it's the way to bring things out into the open. And I totally agree. I mean, I think more of that is happening now that we have more technology and more people plugged in different places. Angela, thank you for saying that. You're an amazing soul too. It's been way too long. We need to get together. And yes, I need to get out of this bunker, but we'll see how that goes. I don't know how that's going to go. With the future, we'll see. Well, we have a clip, don't we? We can show everybody a clip. Should we show the clip? I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's brilliant. Oh.
I don't know.
Which one? You want to deprive them of it? It's so wonderful.
It's a good clip. Which one should we show first?
I think Bomb's one. Bomb Hunters.
Okay. All right. All right. Here, you heard her. She's saying that we're gonna roll this clip. Bob Hunters. Here it is.
There is a hidden threat deep beneath the waves of the Baltic Sea. Hundreds of unexploded chemical bombs, dumped after the Second World War, lay scattered across the seabed. This international team of scientists are on a mission to locate these munitions and understand the threat they pose.
Well, we have two threats. The first threat is the energetic threat, the threat that these munitions could actually blow up and cause damage to the environment or people around it or the fish. The second threat is the human health concern.
This trip is part of a multi-year research project supported by NATO's Science for Peace and Security programme in an effort to ensure the safety of those operating in the Baltic Sea.
In the Baltic Sea today, we can find a lot of underwater munitions, both chemical and conventional. It doesn't really matter what coastal country we go to, but we can find munitions from bombs, rockets, to sea mines.
The munitions dumped in the Baltic contain a cocktail of deadly chemicals, including arsenic. NATO has provided a variety of underwater monitoring equipment, including remote-controlled vehicles, to help map the dump sites.
In a way, we are the modern-day treasure hunters because we only roughly know where the stuff can be found. We are deploying best strategies to actually locate it and then to collect samples, which sometimes means going as close as 20 centimeters from munition. So you not only have to find it, you have to also identify it and collect perfect samples. So such sample, when it comes back and when it's analyzed in laboratory, this is our treasure, and that's what we hunt.
The expeditions also provide opportunities for young student scientists to engage in real-world, potentially life-saving work.
This is the piece of some explosive materials, which is probably TNT. Probably it was part of some bomb, or mine. We'll send those samples for the analysis.
Although this group are monitoring the Baltic Sea bed, unexploded bombs are a global problem.
This is a multilateral problem. In other words, the munitions are in just about every body of water around the world, including our lakes, seas, and oceans. So when we look at discussing the munitions, we really need to do it collectively, because sometimes your problem is my problem, and it's a good way to stop duplication of efforts, whether it's on the science or technology, or actually responding to the munitions themselves by recovery and environmentally friendly disposal.
The findings from the project will be provided to the international scientific community and will help the nations surrounding the Baltic Sea form a long-term strategy to combat this potential threat. The NATO channel in the Baltic Sea, this is Lawrence Cameron.
Wow, that's crazy. That stuff is all over the place. Becca had a question. She says that we need to clean up this mess. How do we mobilize effectively? That's a great question, because this is it's like a problem that's so big. It reminds me of a Dr. Seuss line. It is so big. It is so tall. I don't even know. I know maybe it's Dr. I don't know. I've got kids, obviously, so I read a lot of bedtime stories that sounds like Dr. Seuss. But yeah, what can we do, Sarah? What's the best way to do this?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to do is we need to gain public awareness, just because people don't know about it. before we can, attack it really at a policy side. We need people talking about it. We need people informed about it. Because policymakers, people in Congress, they're not going to address the issue if nobody cares. And right, nobody has been talking about it really. It's just been so out of sight, out of mind. So we need public awareness, and then we need to gain political will, and we need to work together, because as we saw in the video, and hopefully we can show a map soon, we can show just how extensive this problem is. We need to work internationally to get these things out of the waters. So
yeah, we can show a map. So let me throw this up here. So whoops, that's not the map. But there's got to be a map, right? I thought I did this ahead of time. Preparation is key. There we go. There's the map. So this is what are we looking at? Tell us what we're looking at here.
So what we're seeing is we have this is a really great interactive map, but you can see all of these sites are these chemical weapon dump sites. So we have all of these munitions, and we didn't give too much of a historical background, but starting from 1918, we had surpluses of munitions, ammo, chemical weapons. Most of these are from World War II, and they're just leftover munitions. They're things that became time obsolete, and the easiest thing they found to solve this problem, dump it in the ocean. So what we're seeing at all of those sites are places where there are lots and lots of weapons and chemicals in the water, right? So it's just this cocktail of toxic chemicals just littered across the seafloor. So we really need to, get people talking about it, and then we need to either, raise funding, get private funding, as well as get governments involved, so that we actually start working to get these things, out of the water.
Yeah, what's interesting is that, the conversations originally when I was interested in this was with Molokini, and it was, we heard that there were 2 bombs that were there that were TNT bombs, and obviously that's dangerous. But then this thing is such a Pandora's box, because I started looking into it, and then that map that I just showed up with everybody, like this doesn't even scratch the surface. This is just some of the stuff that we know. This isn't all of it. And you'll notice it says up there we've dumped at least 1.6 million tons. And basically, you're right. They're like, oh, the war's over. What are we going to do with all this stuff? I don't know. Just chuck it in the ocean. I mean, it's, it'll be fine. And then I think the other phrase that somebody used was dilution was the solution. But obviously, if you were to put motor oil in your drinking glass and you put a little bit in there, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But before long, there's not much to dilute. And that's really kind of the situation that's here. What I thought was pretty crazy to me was I was looking at that interactive map, and not even 4 miles off the coast of Hana, Maui, which Hana is one of my favorite places. It's crazy remote, and it's like a bit of a sanctuary. It's kind of a place that's kind of lost in time. But not even 4 miles off the coast, there's 16,000 tons of mustard gas chemical weapons.
I'm gonna correct you a little bit.
Am I wrong? It's okay. I'm ready to be wrong.
There's munitions around there's stuff around Maui. There's stuff around Ko'olawe. All these islands.
Yeah.
But I think what you're referencing, the number is there's 16,100-pound mustard gas bombs.
Thank you for correcting me.
South of me in Pearl Harbor.
Right.
So actually, you said 16,000 pounds. So, right, we actually need to raise that number because it's 16,100-pound mustard gas bombs.
All these numbers, I just know it's bad.
Yeah.
I know we gotta get rid of it.
That's just one of those sites, right?
Yeah.
So that's just south of me. Other parts of even on the island I'm on, Waianae coastline, they also have munitions scattered around the coral reefs. And then just all the other islands, Ko'olawe being the most famous because it's on the land there too. But I just noting off of one of the things you said, right? You add this stuff into the water. Dilution is a solution. One of the most ironic things is right, maybe you want to get rid of a material and you'll let it kind of, you might let sunlight or something start to erode away at it, or transfer it into something that's not as chemically harmful. When you dump it into the ocean in like especially deeper depths, you're putting it in the worst conditions for it to break apart or break down chemically, because it's in these colder and zones of the oceans that aren't getting sunlight, so they're not getting broken down so much. You're keeping them in a more stable environment for them to keep all these really toxic stuff and then slowly emit them into the environment, unless of course we blow them up and then we just stream everything into the water column for everyone to eat.
We have a couple questions here. Angela, she says, a serious question: does Trump or Biden play a factor in what you're trying to achieve? You go first. I'm gonna throw you under the bus.
I don't. Oh God. Well, I'm dropping things. I will say I'm definitely a bit more hopeful with Biden presidency, just because he has committed a lot more to addressing climate. That is one of the big policies he's pushing, and so I think we're more likely to get action under a Biden presidency than under Trump presidency, because Trump, we've been seeing him open up, Arctic wildlife, like all this nature, to drilling and terrible stuff. So I don't think he's going to be the president who's going to address environmental issues.
Yeah, the thing to think about is think about how many people have been in power since 1918, right? And everyone knows about this issue. This isn't like a secret thing that we've just uncovered. In fact, I had a conversation with the UN Special Envoy to the Oceans, Peter Thompson, and he said, he goes, this is a huge problem, and no one is touching it. No one is touching it because, generally speaking, it would be like, oh, we're pointing fingers at a government, a president, a military. But at this point, this is the way I look at it, Angela. What has been wrong is wrong, and it serves zero purpose pointing fingers saying what administration, what president, what government can solve this problem. If it needs to get out, take it out. That's really what I think it is. And, I would never, this is just me personally talking. If I feel like if there's experts that I could actually work with to go out there and remove this stuff, then I say, let's go do it. I'd rather ask for forgiveness instead of permission, but that's just my 2 cents. Let's see. Becca had a question. Let me see if I can fire that up here. Becca, she says, it's clear that global regenerative approach needs to include this issue. We need to regenerate the ocean ecosystems as well, and removing these materials to allow for a healthy ocean ecosystems is thriving key. It's a great point, Becca. And you know what's interesting about that? So some of you may or may not be familiar with the UN SDGs. So they stand for the Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17. And the one that has to do with the ocean is 14, life below water. And if Sarah and I got on, broadcast here and we said, you know what, today we want to announce that there's no more plastic in the ocean. There's no illegal fishing. There's no deep sea mining. You know what? Everything is great. Except for the fact that we forgot about the munitions and we didn't want to do anything about it because we didn't want to point fingers at anybody and nobody wanted to talk about it. And that stuff leached into the ocean and killed all the life anyway, regardless of climate change or anything else. The problem is like when you have a fire, you do everything you can to stop the fire. You don't point at one particular thing. And I think as humans, we always want that silver bullet. You're depressed, take a pill. Don't address your issues. I think we need to address our issues, and we don't need to take a Prozac for the planet. I think we really need to really look at it, and that's the way I look at it. I'm always like, well, what can I do? And at the end of the day, I'm just some random redheaded stepchild, and I want to do whatever I can, whatever resources I have to make an impact. And I know Sarah's the same way. So Becca's on board. She says, yep, let's go do it. So, all right, Becca, that's awesome. So I think this is kind of an interesting thing, and Terrence, who you guys saw in that video, he's the expert. And I've had such a great, opportunity to have several conversations with him over these last few months. And the guy really knows what he's talking about. One of the questions I asked him, Sarah, and maybe you can kind of, ad lib on this as well, is I was like, okay, so you remove them from the ocean, You put them on your boat. I don't want to be on that boat for the record. There's a bomb on a boat, man. That's the last place I want to be. But what do you do with them once you have them? And he said, yeah, he can neutralize them. Do you know more about that process?
I will say I'm not, don't know about that process in depth, but right. So if you have something that's really acidic, you can use something basic to neutralize it, right? You even see that on the day-to-day scale, and you can think of, if your stomach is really acidic, then people are taking things like Pepto-Bismol or whatnot. You can even take something like baking soda, that one of the primary ingredients in there is also in Pepto-Bismol or whatnot. So what you're doing is you're making it so that these chemicals can't cause harm anymore. So, I mean, that's what we need to do. We need to neutralize these things, get them out of the water. Sometimes there is going to be, leftover waste, but we can do it in a much safer way. Because I know in the past what has been done is, they've just kind of burned things that they've had left over, and then you're releasing all sorts of compounds into the air. So the best thing we can do is neutralize them and kind of, get rid of these compounds as safely as we can. And that's why we also need the public awareness aspect, so that people are talking about it, people are aware of what's happening, and we're ensuring that we're doing it in the most, ecologically safe and sound way we can.
Yeah, because that's something that's super scary. But, the good news is that, Terrence, he's had, he's a lot of experience with this. I mean, he's been doing it for a very long time, and, he's been more or less taking this stuff and removing it from the ocean. I think it was 1,000. Was it 1,000 bombs or so that he removed from the Baltic Sea? Do you remember?
Oh, something crazy, right? He's terrific. Terrence Long, he founded the International Dialogue on Underwater Munitions. So if anyone's interested in that, I encourage people to just go look it up. You can just look underwatermunitions.org, and that's his website, and you can learn more about his work. I think on that very first page, you can even see that video that we showed, and a couple other videos, as well as a host of other resources.
We have another clip. What is this next clip that we're going to show?
I think it's Footprints of War.
Yep, that's what I have here. What is this one about? What do you want to tell everybody that we're about to see?
So this one, right, it kind of goes more into the history. I haven't seen it in a bit, but talking about, right, how, all this stuff is left over from military, right? Oftentimes you've heard the phrase, if you go into nature, you're not supposed to leave anything behind, maybe your footprints. No trace. Here are the bad footprints, right, that are getting left behind. So that's what they're kind of talking about with footprints. It's all this stuff left behind from war. So these munitions in our precious sea.
All right, well, let's see the clip.
So all these different dots you're seeing along here are actual munition sites, which are full of munitions, or shipwrecks that contain munitions. So now you have that carcinogen laying on the bottom of the ocean, which will continually put stuff into the environment like that for the next 1,000 years. The documents were open to me. I was allowed to go through the archives. There was one in particular that showed 30 tons of special weapons, which is the U.S. designator for nuclear weapons, leaving the port of Virginia and being dumped somewhere on the way to Nova Scotia.
And so the Pentagon sent a message to General Schwarzkopf and said, find Doug Rocky and the guys and tell them to clean up the DU mess. It's totally impossible to clean it up. And I found out I couldn't do it. We found out we couldn't do it. That scared us.
The 20th century is a time where warfare has had a significant impact on the environment. So nature has always been collateral damage.
What does he mean he couldn't do it? What does that mean? Does that mean... what does it mean? Do you know?
Well, I think in that context, it was a lot farther back in however many years and decades. And that's right. It used to be a lot harder for us to take these things out of the water. But we've been, rapidly improving our technology and our means to get these out of the water. So now we have these ROVs, these, remote operated vehicles, all these autonomous robots that can go into the water, and we can use these to bring things out of the water. So, I mean, it might have been a valid conversation in the past to say, we can't get these out, or it's extremely expensive, but we've massively reduced the costs and made it much more safer now that we have all of these robots and autonomous vehicles we can send down.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably the case, and I'm I think really the biggest stumbling block right now is funding. I'm gonna throw up underwatermunitions.org, which is Terrence's NGO, and let's see here. I'm just gonna do this so that you guys can check it out. I'm like the producer. I'm the on-camera talent.
Yeah, you do it all.
I'm doing it all right now. So there we go. There's underwatermunitions.org. We'll lower this, make it nice and neat. Oh, look at that. See, now it's pretty. And yeah, if you're interested to learn more about the work that Terrence is doing, he really is the expert. He's doing some really amazing stuff. Go check it out. One of the things that we're really trying to figure out is like, how do we get a guy like Terrence to Hawaii? How do we get these two removed from Molokini? And the thing that he says is that, well, it's not going to stop there. Once we get there, we're probably going to find some more, because we're out down there digging around, and they've got specialized materials, and the materials in the bombs are detectable by some of the technology that they have. So who knows? We'll see what happens. But yes, that's Terrence's website. We need to have him on here too. We need to pull him in for a conversation. He's a very interesting fellow. But yeah, no, Sarah, I've really enjoyed this time. I always enjoy just kind of like chatting about this stuff, and I'm always, I feel like every time I walk away from these conversations, there's always something to learn. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's definitely great to have more conversations about this, and always lovely to speak with you and other people who are, ocean oriented and working to help the planet.
Now, there's some really good people in the chat. I'm so glad that you guys have watched and hung out with Sarah and I. And the joke I always make about Ridge to Reef is that with the quarantine, I thought, well, man, there's so much like talk about so many other things. I thought, well, there's some really good things and there's some awesome things to talk about. There's some things that we still need to keep on the forefront. But at the same time, I don't get paid for this. So basically, I just turn this thing on when it's cool to talk about something. So, Sarah and I had a couple text messages back and forth. They're like, should we get on and talk about this stuff and show some stuff? Yeah, cool. Angela, thank you Angela says, I love your glasses. Thanks. You know what? I was just looking today. I was like, holy crap, I've had these things for like forever, for 5 years. One of these days, they're probably just going to fall off my face because I'm too cheap to buy more glasses, and then I won't have them anymore. Tamara,
we won't be able to recognize you anymore.
I know, right? My daughter said that. She's like, "Did people really know what you look like?" And I'm like, "No, they probably don't." That'll be for another episode. We'll do that. Anyway, well, thank you all for watching. Sarah, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great night.
See you, everybody.